Hey,
There we go.
now I don't know if it's mine or yours.
I'm pretty sure it's mine. So I added two Thunderbolt docks for ease of having my external hard drives connected with one cable, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think there was some interference between having it plugged up and having the Thunderbolt interface plugged up because one of the docks also registers an audio unit device. So I think that's where the problem was, because what I did was I unplugged all of the Thunderbolt stuff except my audio interface, and it did still seem to take it a bit to connect, but it did work.
Good. Yeah, so it's kind of a, I don't know. It did not a thing, but I don't know. It did seem slightly different when it did connect.
Yeah. And I erased and reinstalled everything last week as well. So I at least know that for the most part, I'm working with a clean system.
What got you? Any particular motivation for that?
Just because we were having some of the audio issues in general.
Okay.
And it was like, well, let me eliminate cruft from me trying a bunch of different things and having potentially legacy extensions conflicting and things of that nature.
Gotcha.
So it was just easier since I had everything saved off anyway. It was just easier to go ahead and erase and reinstall real quick. It'll be interesting to see how audio quality is this time too, because I'm using a little bit different setup than I've used in the past.
Oh, cool. What did you change?
I decided not to install the overly bloated Universal Audio software package because it's like 8 gigs for that audio interface.
Wow.
And instead installed the 800 meg software package for the PreSonus Thunderbolt audio interface that I have. Drastic difference in sizes there. But I figured I would give it a shot, at least until I figure out why I was not able to get good audio quality out of the Shure mic, and I know that it's got to be something about the way I was trying to connect and do things, that I decided instead of playing with it with the recordings with the show, I would play with it outside of the recordings for the show and figure out what's going on. And I just haven't gotten that far.
Gotcha. How's your last 2 weeks been?
Overall good. We, let's see. So right before we last recorded, I think, we did the initial production shoot of the first class that I'm doing in conjunction with the previous jiu-jitsu instructor. And we've done a second shoot, and we've got most of the stuff ready to launch from a technical perspective. It's just getting some fine-tuned elements done from an editing perspective to launch with the first 2 classes, hopefully within the next week.
Oh, cool.
So it's been a lot of moving parts and time-consuming stuff from an administrative perspective, but it's I'm excited to have that coming soon. Other than that, it's just been more and more of the same, I think, for the most part.
More and more what?
Of the same.
Oh, okay.
Just, I don't even know at this point. I've been trying to, let me back up slightly. It's kind of a side tangent. So this evening, or today overall, I decided that my office and fitness space and everything just no longer suited what I needed it to do. And part of it's because I no longer have to worry about other stuff other than my work stuff.
Right.
And so I decided, all right, I'm going to rip everything out of the closet downstairs and make it my organized actual storage space for production gear and everything else that I need easy-ish access to, but I don't necessarily want it just laying around everywhere. Because basically the basement had started to feel really cluttered and really just not useful. So the closet was the first thing. And then I got, as a result of that, the desks squared away with stuff up off the floor and where I need it within easy reach and everything else. Still not done, but it's at least mostly there. And the next step will be to take stock of the middle of the basement area, so the fitness area, and see if there's anything that I want to redo there. And the fitness side of stuff has worked fine. It's not like it didn't serve its purpose. It's just if I'm already in this mood of moving everything around and rearranging things and making things fit for what I want, is there anything I need to address there, or is it fine? So I'll at least evaluate it. But I think for the most part, all that's left is to clean up a little bit. There's a small pile of stuff up under the other desk over to the side where the synthesizer is, that it's not in the way, but I don't want to leave it there either. I just need to find places for it or get rid of it. And so that's the last little bit of stuff that I need to do for sure, other than just taking stock of what's in the basement and if I need to make other changes. So, that's most of what the recent stuff has been. Like, even though the work itself didn't happen until today, I was looking at it and formulating a plan and trying to figure out what that meant for ripple effects, because obviously moving stuff out of this room means that some other room is going to have to absorb stuff, and, just trying to get a plan of action for all of that.
Yeah. Well, that sounds like a good spring cleaning kind of thing.
Yeah.
I enjoy that I enjoy doing that.
It's the kind of thing that's like, we're going to be out of town in a couple of weeks, and it's like I want to get everything that I need to get done from any kind of organizational or administrative standpoint done, then be out of town, enjoy the break, relax, and come back and be ready to hit the ground running. And so it's kind of a haphazard, unorganized scramble at times, but it serves a purpose, and it's good. It gives me a chance to not have to just sit in front of the computer and work through other stuff constantly as well. It gives me a chance to move around and reevaluate some other decisions that we had made on where to store stuff and how I might better leverage some additional storage capacity in the garage. And, good to make every room feel comfortable and welcoming and inviting, and not just the living space upstairs.
Yeah. Well, that sounds good.
All that said, I still have done a couple of fun things.
Oh, what did you do?
I bought another stabilizer gimbal.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm gonna back up. I now have 3 gimbals for 3 distinct purposes. I have the one for the phone, which is obviously the portable, easy to use, handy scenario. I have a smaller one for my secondary camera that I had. That's the one I already had prior to ordering the bigger one, and typically speaking, it suits most of my purposes without a problem. The only reason I decided to add the third is because I didn't have one that had a payload capacity that could support my primary camera with the battery mount and anything else I rigged for truly cinematic work. And I kept going back and forth between, well, it's not really a need, but it is something I want to play with, and, just the whole mental, how can I rationalize or justify this? And finally decided I would do it anyway, for 2 primary reasons. One, I'm mostly going to be shooting with my primary camera if I'm doing something that's for me creatively and not my secondary camera. So it makes sense that I have a gimbal for it. Like, it would make more sense for me to get rid of the smaller one and just keep the new one than it would to be the other way around. And then 2, both of them have the ability to either mount on a tripod or the tripod legs, and that gives me a very convenient and comfortably stable secondary camera from a tripod standpoint at any given time. And so it's one of those things where I decided, I can justify this anyway, just from the standpoint of I need something for the primary camera, but 2, there are a lot of times that I'm going to want to set something up that that the tripod alone probably isn't going to do everything I need it to do. I'm going to need to make some really minor adjustments on angles and things that it just makes it a lot easier to use a gimbal to do. And so yeah, I ordered the Ronin 4 Pro actually from DJI.
Okay.
Figured if I was going to buy one, I might as well buy the top of the line.
I'm looking for it now. Handheld.
And I am amazed at how little I know about how to use all of the stuff. I know it's not hard, but there's a lot that you can do with that particular combo kit, because it's got a LiDAR system that you can also use for focus tracking that I haven't even delved into yet. I don't even typically use the connection to the camera and use controls off the gimbal, because I'm typically using the USB port for power delivery from the battery pack. So like I'm just using it as a manual gimbal for the most part. And I need to look at different ways to be able to leverage some of the other features while that USB port is in use.
Wow, this thing's cool.
I've had fun playing with it already, and it gets heavy quick if you're trying to hold it one-handed, like real quick. But part of that is obviously the rig and everything that I've got on top of it. But yeah, it's a two-handed beast for sure.
That's really cool.
I think I'm finally done buying gear, though.
No,
I'm sure I will find other things, but I've got so much more than I truly need. But I tried to get the things that I had, use cases that I could envision needing them for over the next 6 months.
Yeah.
Stuff that I knew I have this planned that I want to do, and that this is how I need to fulfill it, kind of thing. I guess I have, so I put a couple of little notes in. I don't know what exactly I was thinking. So obviously I've been using the primarily my main cameras, but I used the iPhone as a third camera for one shoot, and I realized I did not have a workflow for iPhone use as a camera from a production standpoint that I liked. And for whatever reason, I kept thinking about like syncing it through photo library or maybe AirDrop being an alternative, things that took forever. And then all of a sudden it just came to me and hit me like, what about good old image capture? And that actually is probably the better workflow option out of all of them for simply pulling a file off the phone and being able to use it in some other editing program. So I figured I would at least call that out, that I had a brain fart until I remembered image capture was a thing. And it worked flawlessly when I decided to go that way instead of the many, many, many hours that it was trying to take to do things the other way.
I love image capture. I use that, I guess before iCloud, photos in the cloud. That's what that's how I like from years and years ago, started, when I was using iPhoto, I just didn't like how, I don't want to say, I felt like the import from iPhoto was a little bit flaky, and so I used image capture and to get it off of the whatever media it was on, and then imported it into iPhoto. I don't know why that made a difference, but it seemed to. So the workflow was longer, but I don't know. Image capture is fantastic.
It definitely is how I will use, or the workflow that I will use for any time that I use the iPhone as an additional camera on a shoot. I always, as far as photos go, I always went with just Aperture's import, since I was an Aperture user prior. And then I guess it was around the time that Aperture was discontinued that I pretty much just did not import photos off the phone anymore. I just let them sync with the photo library and then maintained a separate Lightroom library for the other stuff that I shot. And then if I really wanted something in Lightroom, I would export it from Photos and import it into Lightroom.
Yeah, I don't know where I was going to go with her. I was thinking a moment ago, like I had Aperture 2 and Aperture 3, but I never had a use for them. I think I still have both of those discs.
I know I still have my discs because all of my software discs are one of the stacks of things under the desk that I was alluding to earlier that I need to go through and decide what I'm keeping and what I'm tossing, because it's not limited to my Apple software. There's a lot of old Windows stuff and other things there too that I truly have no need for anymore. And then the other thing is I decided to give a Pro Max phone a shot again.
Oh, that's an interesting turn of events.
Yeah, I had not planned to for a whole host of reasons, but I'm finding I'm not hating it as much this time, and I think it's because I have a legitimate use case that makes it useful, that I like, and so I'm more forgiving of the slightly larger size. We'll see if I continue to feel that way for long, because I've only had the phone for a couple of days now. But I linked an accessory in the notes. That is what drove me to try it. I saw that. The company is Axoon, and they make a number of different things for transmitting video from a camera to another device. And one of the things they make is this CineView system. And I know that all the pictures, they show it, like with the phone in the holder attached to the camera, but it's not necessary because it doesn't plug into it. The app communicates wirelessly to the device. So the use case that I have is to have my camera over across the room with the CineView system attached to the camera, and then I can have the phone closer to me, a little bit outside of view of the lens, where I can see the framing and everything else and make adjustments without having to be close enough to see a 5-inch monitor. Like it achieves greater distance than I would be able to achieve with just the external monitor that I have on my primary camera. So it gives me two options. Now, did I have to have the phone to do it? No, because I could, obviously the same use case would work with the non-Pro Max or the non-Max version of the Pro phone, or work with an iPad. But I can put the iPad up kind of centrally and have it connected and have me and any other person that needs to view it see it on the iPad, but then have the phone connected at the same time. And the bigger screen helps me from a framing perspective, even though I could get by with the non-Max version and achieve the same thing. It's just that extra little bit of real estate really does make a difference in that particular use case. And I've enjoyed having that, and I haven't been annoyed by the trade-offs yet. And I emphasize yet, because I'm sure it's coming. But I forgot that this iteration got the increased optical zoom on the other camera.
Yeah.
And I've played with it a little bit and kind of like having access to that. So I don't know. All of that is to say that I've been more forgiving of the size disparity this time than I was at any point previously. And I think it's just because currently my work efforts being in video production, it makes sense to have as many larger screens available as possible for different aspects. I don't know. I really don't know how much of it is just where I find myself with what I'm currently doing, as opposed to my disdain for the larger phone in general. So we'll see how it plays out. But that was an unexpected decision. I did have a use case for upgrading a phone anyway, because I maintain a separate phone and phone number to use for the business so that I can take payments out and about, even though I could do it off of my phone. I have two different ways to do it, and one way impacts my daily use personally in a way that I don't like, because the bank requires me to sign out of my account and sign into the business account, and then I have to redo all the Face ID stuff, and it's just easier to have two separate devices from that perspective.
That sounds awful.
And so even though I don't use that number for the business, I know that eventually I might have a need to. And I've done this for over a year now anyway, where I've had the other phone that was set up for specific apps and use cases and all that would not be my daily driver, configured in a way that is specifically for this thing.
Yeah.
So I didn't feel too bad about, all right, I just makes 2 iPhone 15 Pros, 1 Max, 1 not for the business. That way I'm streamlined all USB-C instead of having to worry about a lightning cable again still. All that to say is that I found a number of different ways to rationalize it, and we will see if I regret any of it later. But it also gave me a chance to get the natural titanium look for me. So,
how do you like it?
I love it. I love it a lot.
You like it more than the blue?
I love blue. Like I think so in general for a device, but I really do like that blue. So it's tough for me to say that I'm not biased toward the blue from a love of the color and in and of itself, but the natural titanium just looks so good.
Yeah, I like the natural titanium. The main thing that I've seen is the watch. I think I saw it in the store. But this blue is a really good blue. It's better than the Pacific blue from the iPhone 12 Pro. I think it's their best blue so far. But I think my most favorite color I've had is the black from the iPhone 7. Just a regular black.
The one that was kind of matte. It wasn't truly matte, but it was kind of, it had that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
The Batman phone.
The Batman phone. Because that year they did black and then they did jet black, which was a very glossy
right
black. Shiny, glossy, and then the black was matte. It seemed like it had a matte finish in as much as like the titanium has a matte finish. It's not actually matte, but it's not super smooth and glossy.
Yeah, I liked that one quite a bit too. But
maybe it's nano textured.
I've liked so far. I don't know that I've had a complaint about any of the blues. I know that you and I talked about the Pacific blue some time ago, and I kind of like the Pacific blue. I don't think it's their best one, but I didn't have the same reaction to it that you did.
I mean, I like the Pacific blue, but it's not as it left something to be desired. The Sierra blue is just I'm not a fan of.
That was the one that was brighter, right?
Yeah, it was more of a baby blue or a sky blue.
That was the one that I skipped. I decided to go with the black or dark gray, whatever derivative was, normal.
Oh, and it was only on the it was whatever, maybe the iPhone 13. It wasn't a color for the Pro phone.
What was the one that was a little bit lighter that was one of the Pro phones then? I thought that was the one.
Oh, maybe I'm mistaken.
Or no, what it may have been is they did a green and did not do a blue, and I skipped the green.
The 11 Pro, they had a green.
Yeah, and I did not go with the green because that's just not my preference.
Midnight green, that was what they called it. Then they had Pacific blue on the iPhone 12 Pro. And the 13 Pro, they had, I don't know why, but between the 12, I looked at 3 phones and going to the 13 Pro, Mac Tracker moved the colors. Oh, no, they didn't. I didn't see it. Oh, I'm wrong. The 13 Pro did have Sierra blue. They had silver, graphite, gold, Sierra blue, and alpine green.
Yeah, and that year I went with graphite because I was not a big fan of the Sierra blue.
I had a graphite one of those as well. And then the 14 Pro, I didn't have a 14 Pro. They had silver, space black, gold, and deep purple.
Yeah, so I went space black with the 14.
I need to see pictures of these again.
So I do have my 13 and 14 sitting in their respective Peak Design cases over there with my Cube now. I probably need to sell one of these. Like, there's no reason I should have this many phones. I don't know how I found myself in this. I don't know how I found myself in this position where I suddenly have so many phones. But
Right. Oh, yeah. That's what a rationalization will do to
yeah,
you.
and it's all because at some point I decided, screw it, I'm just going to buy this one, and like another one was not out of the upgrade program, or I don't know. There's something with that, I'm sure, where one or two of them, I'm sure I decided, you know what, I'm going to get this one, but I don't want to deal with the headache of all this other stuff, or I don't know. Who knows? Or maybe I just bought out the upgrade program on one of them. That would actually account for, I bet that's what I did. I bet with the 13 Pro, I just decided to buy it out so that I had the squared edges design, and then signed up again for new with the 14 Pro. No, but then why do I still have it and have the 15 Pro? Maybe I bought out both of them. Hell, who knows?
I do not remember this Alpine green for the 13 Pro.
I do remember the green quite vividly because I remembered the, that may be what it is. I may not have the 14 Pro over there. I might have the 12 and 13, or the 12
I'm
and
just
14.
surprised that they had. I'm just surprised that they had that many colors for the Pro. They had a blue and a green. Normally it's three shades of black and white, or three shades of gray. That's interesting. Well, I guess with the iPhone 15 Pro, they had a bunch of colors. No,
They had four.
they did not have a bunch of colors. They have four. The natural, they have black, silver, white, natural, and blue.
I think so. I mean, they don't call them that. Like, there's.
That's what they.
Yeah, it's Starlight or something like that. Isn't that what they call the?
No. Dishwater white, natural titanium, blue titanium, white titanium, and black titanium. If the blue, I don't know. I feel like the blue hadn't been so. I kind of want to do a white phone. I never did a white phone.
I did with the
3G. I did the 3G in white.
Yeah, I did the 3GS and the 4S.
Yeah, you didn't do the 4 because you would have had to wait.
Yeah, it was the 4S that I did in white.
I didn't like the white front.
In retrospect, using it, I didn't like it as much as I thought I would, but I did like the idea of white and Apple devices true to the
me too.
The whole Jobsian preference.
Well, it's like they went with in the late 90s they went with all those wild colors to to differentiate from the. Well, I was gonna say Apple didn't do beige. They did the platinum, or I can't remember what they call it, Snow White. So, that doesn't seem like the right name for it. But they weren't the typical. Well, I guess they did do a typical beige, but then I can't remember the design aesthetic, but it was more of a cooler gray color. It wasn't the typical beige ABS.
Well, I don't know this for sure. This is my speculation, but if I remember correctly, I think the straying or getting away from the more typical beige was when they cracked down on third-party manufacturers being able to create essentially what we would now call a Hackintosh, even though it was more or less more widely sanctioned at the time.
Yeah, they did. It was they allowed Apple clones. They licensed.
But those would have all been, for the most part, beige cases, unless you were somebody who was really doing something wild. And I think it was after removing any opportunity for a third party to officially be a Mac clone that they started going with the other color schemes. The cooler. I would say it was just gray for the most part, but I know that they're in between them doing like the Quicksilvers and all. There was a slightly different color palette that was used as well.
This would have been before Jobs came back. The so they weren't doing the so I think so if you go back, I think that beige color had to do with the makeup of the plastic. I think there were I'm trying to think of I think it's the abbreviation is ABS. I'm trying to and yeah, uh, it's acrylonitrile butadiene styrene, and that's what uh, a lot of those cases were. The problem was uh, UV would turn them yellow.
And I guess technically it wasn't until later that ABS plastics were able to be made in a much wider array of colors. Because, I mean, at this point, you could manufacture it in pretty much any color you wanted.
Right, right. There's so much as come on. So I did double check. So from 19, they did call it Snow White, even though it wasn't actually white. It was a, which is which was is um interesting because they actually did a very white color in 2002 with the G4 iMac. But they did so the design aesthetic they called it Snow White, um, and it was not the slightly nicer looking I guess I guess less yellow in I don't know it was a off white color. Some people called it like a fog color or a warm gray platinum color. Um, so it's weird that they called it Snow White, but I guess comparatively it is a lot whiter than the other enclosures. But yeah, I was gonna say I too like the silver and white from I guess the iPod predates that G4, so I think the iPod was the first thing that they released that was the white iPod, white headphones. Was there something before that would have been white?
Not, well, yeah, technically, I guess the Apple II. Like if you go back far enough to the 2GS, one of the two.
So that was the Snow White coloring where it was actually like a warm gray, and whereas the iPod was just like this clean, crisp white.
So what I remember of the 2GS was very much remembering it as a white color, but it probably is colored by the fact that everything else was beige.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's definitely not as white as the iPod.
Yeah. So with that being said, the iPod might have been the first purely white device.
Yeah. So the iMac followed suit, and then the iMac G5 and so forth, and we had the white MacBook, and the iBook was white. Forgot about the iBook. So yeah, I like that era of white, and I kind of want a white phone because now they've done good at there's not a lot on the front of the phone except for screen, but they didn't put white on it anymore. It's the front is black and the back is white, and the sides are white, kind of like the 3G and 3GS.
Yeah, it's funny with modern design, I would be amenable to a white, but man, does that natural titanium just look awesome.
Yeah. It is a pretty color.
It made me remember, even though the Thai book was painted, it made me remember why I liked the Thai book so much. Because that obviously that paint didn't stay,
No, I remember it was like it was a problem.
Yeah. Some viewed it as a problem. I viewed it as a return to a better finish.
Oh, you like the way it looked with the underneath.
Yeah.
I didn't have a lot of. I remember thinking that screen was amazing, like how thin that thing was. And am I remembering correctly that there's a little door on the back to access the ports? Like the whole back had a door.
I'm having to think back. I don't remember the back having a what I would call a door. I don't know. As you say it, I'm trying to remember Because I'm envisioning a model that had a door, and I'm trying to remember which one that was. The tie book, I don't remember there being a door to access the ports as much as there might have been one or two ports that were accessible via like a small door, but it wasn't across the entire back because I very much remember plugging stuff into the sides. But it's been so long now. Like I could be merging like 3 or 4 different computers in my head at this point.
Don't you have one?
I wish I did, and
Okay.
unfortunately,
I thought you.
well, yeah. So I technically still do if I could ever figure out where it went. But so I loaned it to a coworker, moved around a little bit. He unfortunately passed away, and I don't know where it went during that time frame.
All right, I found a picture. There is. I was right. There is a flap, not the entire back, but like inside the hinges, in between the hinges, there was a. I guess you call it a door, and it gave you access to a number of things. I would like to find a better image, but yeah, I do remember that because I remember having so I remember working with. I worked at a company that was primarily Apple computers. That was my first exposure to Apple, and I remember seeing that flap and moving it for some reason. I don't remember. I don't know what I had.
I mean, I remembered at least some sort of flap, but I couldn't remember for sure if that was on that model or a different one.
I sent you a picture.
Okay. So yeah, I was thinking that was on a different model.
And I think newer ones had that VGA socket was replaced by a DVI at some point.
Yeah, and the DVI was on the side, if I remember correctly. Or was that on the side on the unibodies? Maybe that's what I'm thinking of is when they went.
That's on the side on the unibodies.
So maybe that's what I was remembering was the transition to the unibodies.
Nope, even before the unibodies actually. There's another picture. That one has a DVI on the back, and more USB. It looks like more USB ports. Nope.
Yeah, no.
So you had fire.
Yeah, what I was saying was that I remember plugging DVI into the side, and I think the transition to the side on the DVI was unibody, or at least the aluminum.
It was Mac. It was Intel.
Okay.
Oh, maybe aluminum too. So it might have been the transition to aluminum. I think you're right because they didn't stick anything in the back. Because I remember, there was no ports on the back, because the way the display opened up, it would have obscured everything, and you wouldn't be able to connect anything.
Yeah, that was when they went with the one long wide hinge.
Yes, it was. And technically, I guess there's two hinges underneath it, but you just can't see them. And then the unibodies, they came out a few years later, post Intel, in late 2008. I remember I was working at the Apple store when the unibodies came out, and I remember one of the geniuses there was like, "I just want to take it apart," and he did. He took one of the floor models and he just started taking it apart in the GR. But it was, I never took I think so. I want to say the aluminum power books, you could pull I don't know if you could pull you could pull the keyboard up to get to certain things. And then when they went to Intel, it was just you had to let me back up. On the power books, it was meant to be user accessible. You just pulled those two latches up to lift the keyboard up, and you could put in like your airport card and so forth. But when they went to Intel, you had to like unscrew there's a number of screws. I think I can almost remember them.
Well, and there were two variations there too, because you had the prior to the unibody where you had kind of a top case and a bottom shell, and then with the unibody, everything was from the bottom.
Yeah, you had the top case, and then you had just the plate on the bottom, because you went from you got to everything from the through the bottom, where everything. So pre-unibody, everything was sitting in the bottom and fastened to the bottom, and you had to remove the top casing, which the keyboard was integrated in. And then the unibody was like you went in through the bottom for everything. Oh man, do you miss taking apart those computers?
Not in the least.
Really?
I guess part of it's probably because of how many years I've spent in general with various pieces of technology, but as complex and tight as Apple engineered things to be, it just got frustrating eventually. Like it was more.
No, I know what you're saying.
Yeah, I mean, and I don't think that's even quite the right term, because like I don't mind taking them apart necessarily, but I don't miss it. Whereas there are times that I do miss the whole custom PC for gaming scene.
Mm-hmm.
But do I miss it enough to actually do anything about it? Not at all.
Obviously not. Yeah, I was gonna say obviously
but
not.
But it's the kind of thing that I at least fondly recall modifying and tweaking and changing things there, whereas at least with my stint at Apple, most of it is just I'm kind of glad I don't have to do that anymore. Like I could still do it and I don't mind doing it, but I don't really want to.
Right. I wouldn't mind working for Apple again if I could, get that go back and redo that employee stock purchase program where I could get it for less than $40. Start at less than $40 a share.
That would be awesome.
Man, I'd spend that time machines. We need them.
Yeah. Man,
I sent you another.
I don't even want to think about how much money I lost out on from stock options from Apple.
Oh, it was in the millions.
Tie book running 9.2.
Yeah. Is it 9.2? How can you tell that that's 9.2?
I'm just guessing because it shipped with 9 and 10 on. So during the tie book era, when the tie book first shipped, OS 10 also launched, but you could run a dual boot between 9 and 10. And I think
that lasted for a few years.
And I think it was 9.2 that it started with, but I could be mistaking like the last update to 9 that maybe it was. But either way, it was 9 and 10. And so my just gut reaction is that it's 9.2.
I was just going to say, it looks, that platinum interface on that titanium PowerBook looks fantastic. Like it's I do remember how crisp, it's not, it's certainly not anything compared to what we have today, but I just remember, it's at any point in time, if you look at Apple's current lineup, you're like, that screen is one of the best screens I've seen. You can pick, you find their best product, and you look at it, and that's one of the best screens I've ever seen in my life, and they always have a product that probably has the best consumer screen on it. Maybe some TVs are out there, but those TVs might be kind of niche.
I don't.
Yeah, comment.
I don't know that I have ever honestly looked at a non-Apple, or how do I want to phrase this? I don't think I have ever looked at an Apple display disparagingly in any way compared to its current day competition. Like where I'm going with it is that I've never seen a better display than Apple's. At whatever time that the current screen is available that you're looking at. And they stand the test of time really well, as opposed to some other displays.
I think that if you were to even take which current Apple device, not a previous generation that they still sell, but which current generation Apple device that has the lowest quality display, and it's still better than most displays.
Oh, I'm going to have to look and see what they currently sell. Hold
on. Well, I was going to say, my guess would be maybe the Mac Mini.
Well, the Mini doesn't have a display. Like you can't count.
I'm sorry.
The Mini.
I meant the iPad
Okay.
Mini. Sorry. Yeah, that was that was funny. That was like, there's no display on that, John. You dummy.
Well, I mean, with that standpoint, whatever horrible display somebody plugs it into, of course it's going to be the worst experience.
I mean, even at one point, one of the iPod Nanos had the highest pixel per inch of any Apple display, and I don't know if it still holds that record. It was pre-Retina, but I think it was the short, fat, the Danny DeVito of iPod Nanos. But I looked up the specs for the PowerBook, and I remember saying it was super crisp, but it was 1152 by 768, so it's not even HD.
Oh yeah, no,
But
that most definitely predated HD.
1152 768. I mean, I guess technically it's HD because 720 is the lowest thing the lowest resolution considered HD, and it exceeds that. So if you're thinking in 2000, think back to 2001, none of us had seen, I remember the first HD TV I saw must have been 2002 or 3 in a Best Buy catalog or a Best Buy Sunday mailer. So yeah, like that 1152 by 768. That was a pretty high quality display.
So
in 2001.
So what I do remember of that display was that I could actually run Final Cut Pro with the little preview window at a large enough resolution to be useful, which was great compared to displays previously. I don't even know what that preview window would have been sized at. I remember being able to run it and get a feel for what something would be like. I don't know, without a lot of hem hawing. Like I didn't feel like I needed to resize things and plug in an external monitor and move stuff around, and like I could just on the native screen run Final Cut Pro and not be overly cramped.
That's I mean, I can remember that time. That would have been a big deal.
Yeah,
because for the longest time for computers, video was the one of the most most resource intensive.
Well, the funny thing is, it wasn't even the intensiveness from a resource usage perspective. It was the intensiveness from a display usage perspective.
Well, I'm going beyond that and saying, like, the number of pixels on your display is as a resource. Resolution. Things are very low. Things were low resolution for a long time, and
well, and I guess the only reason I make the distinction is because even like back then, yes, some things could play without rendering, but that was there were so few and far between things that could do that you still had to wait on render times and everything else from a resource utilization perspective. So I guess that's why
true.
I make the distinction in my head.
No. That's a good point. I forgot that you had to wait for. I forgot that it feels like, well, I mean, even today, like modern Mac. I mean, there's a I guess we're on the M4 now. Apple Silicon. Most recent Apple Silicon. There's a dedicated portion of that chipset or package that is meant for decoding. You have hardware decoding of, I think it's H2, probably of various decoders, but I guess is H.265 still top most new?
Technically, yes. So, everything that I generally look at is either H.264 or 265.
Yeah, and so there's a portion of the package that's dedicated hardware for encoding and decoding that. So, but it seems like, so in the era that we're talking about in the early 2000s, it would have been CPU or it would have been, I guess, if you had a discrete graphics card, that's the hardware that would have been doing the work, and then and it wasn't it wasn't specialized like it is today for
Well,
it.
no. So
Or
the funny thing is that actually, I'm sure the GPU played a role, but it was more CPU intensive,
more
from a
CPU.
rendering perspective, because that predates the ability of the operating system to offload stuff to the GPU specific for rendering and other actions.
I wasn't sure yet. So at that point, then the GPU was just
display.
the rest of the display. Oh wow, man, a lot has changed.
No kidding. Like now, so the funny thing is, I was thinking about this the other day because of recording the first set, and just looking at file sizes and everything else. Like from 2 hours of video, I had 350-ish gig worth of data. And I remembered thinking about how that would have completely destroyed every available resource I could have even thought to have or throw at a computer, a decade ago even. And yeah, I mean, at that rate, I'm going to eat up my available storage space pretty quick, but I could absorb that and work with it no problem. And that doesn't even take into account what all I can do from an editing perspective without having to wait on render times or, export a video into a whole nother application to do this other thing. Like, so much has changed about those workflows and what we're capable of doing, even on the lower end of available systems. Obviously, I don't have a low end system. We've talked about my ridiculous over configuration before, but like regardless of what system I were to try to do this on, it would just blow anything out of the water that I was doing a couple of decades ago. And it's amazing to think about how far we've come, even though it doesn't necessarily feel like it should be something that has changed that much over that time frame,
Yeah, I think I think part of it is just like having lived through it. It feels like you don't feel the incremental change, or the changes feel incremental.
Well, yeah, I mean, the funny thing is, I was thinking about it, and within the scope of iPhone changes the other day, and how from iPhone 12 to 15, you can really feel like each year was a very slow and steady incremental step. But if you look at what like the 12 was capable of as opposed to the 15, there's a pretty big difference. And where I was going with it is just that I was thinking about how we get so used to these year-over-year steady improvements that it's easy to lose sight of just how far improved it is over 3 or 5 or 10 years ago. It's the 1% better argument. Like, when you get down to it,
right.
It's
right.
If you just do 1% better each day, after a couple of years, you're going to be amazed at where you are compared to, the 2-3 years prior.
Yeah. So, yeah, because you got to think. I was thinking about what computing looked like in. Okay, let's say in 1984. That's a good year to pick because that was 40 years ago this year, and that's when Apple released the Macintosh, which was it considered a failure? It didn't do well.
So
I don't know. There's a lot of hype.
It depends on how you want to define failure. Was it a commercial success? I would say no.
No, it wasn't. Would you call it a failure, though? Was it a commercial failure?
When you qualify it with commercial, maybe. So
yes,
I would say it was.
It didn't do well in the market, and it didn't replace the Apple II.
Right, and so for many reasons, it was a failure from a company perspective, which I will argue for sure.
But as far as like
cultural
where
impact,
it took computing,
yeah,
huge. No, it was a huge success,
and that's why I had trouble answering the question because it's
in its day it was a commercial failure. Is that fair to say, or maybe not a failure, but it was not successful in the way that they wanted it to be. It did not replace the Apple II for.
Yeah, I could agree with all of that. It
But
was
as far as
from any
computing goes, it led the
yeah,
way.
from
It blazed
from
the
any
trail.
business or monetary standpoint, it was not a success. But nothing that we have today, I think, would exist without its success culturally.
Yes, but then there was also the Lisa, which that was definitely a failure. Very expensive. Did cool, like it was very expensive, and then there was a point where Apple like threw them into a landfill. Like what they didn't sell, they threw into a landfill at some point after. I think it was after Jobs was fired.
Well, and I mean, the Newton would follow a similar vein, right? Like it's funny when you think about Apple and its history, where they are one of the few companies that have had such public failures, but those failures have still driven the company forward in ways that were just unforeseen at the time, right? Like
Yeah,
just thinking about the Newton as a prime example, like there's nothing about the iPhone or iPad that would exist without forays into the Newton to begin with. It influenced so much of their decision making in bringing the following or the subsequent products to market that you can't say that they would exist without the Newton having been attempted.
yeah. I think it's funny that Jobs killed the Newton as soon as he got back into a place of power there. Like just straight up killed it. But it was like, but it wasn't, he killed it, but it was like he killed it and then he funded, research to replace it, because we all because the iPad, they were working, they were trying to develop the iPad before they developed the phone. The phone they were able to get the phone to market sooner for various reasons. And going back to screens, I remember looking at the screen of the very first iPhone. And I was like, "Oh my gosh!" It just was so crisp. I just had not seen something like that before. But then he also threw shade when announcing the iPhone, because it was like, if basically he didn't say I'm gonna say it in the spirit of what he meant, not necessarily the exact words he said, but it was basically, if you have to rely on a stylus, you've failed. But I think he actually said it as like, if there's a stylus, you failed or whatever. But whereas now it's like, the Apple Pencil is a stylus, but it's not it's not a failure because it's not the primary input device. It's a specialized input device. So whereas the Newton required a stylus, like there wasn't, you could be kind of like a monkey and use your fingernail because it wasn't a. Now, is multi-touch capacitive touch? I can't remember what the technology is in the Newton, but you had.
Well, I don't remember in the Newton, but I know capacitive touch is what came about with the iPhone.
Right. I don't know what they called the. I don't know what that. I don't know what that touchscreen technology was called.
But it's funny,
anyway.
you were talking about how crisp the original iPhone screen was. I remember,
iPhone, yeah.
I don't even remember the display being something that I was that concerned about as much as the seamlessness or smoothness of the touch interface, because previous touch interfaces had been so clunky. Like, it's the ability for the original iPhone to have a touch interface that was actually responsive and didn't have all the artifacting elements of previous touchscreens like that. That was what blew me away. Like, I could care less if the display was crisp at that point. The fact that it was that responsive meant everything.
And then you could just flick a scroll, like if you were on a web page. Well, first of all, it was amazing that you could get the web pages, like a full website. You weren't on the mobile web. You had a web page. You had a piece, a computer, personal computer web page. It wasn't some rendering for a mobile device.
Hold on, I think we need to interject here real quick for any younger listener that happens across. At that particular time, the mobile web was a very text-specific version of the web designed for previous iteration cell phones to attempt to browse. Like, there was not a mobile web with regard to, changing dynamic responsive design. It was mobile
Right,
from the
right.
standpoint of it was a text only interface because of the limited capabilities of cell phone browsers prior to having an actual web browser on a phone.
It was like whatever was happening on the web that you accessed on your computer, that was, state of a lot of, you could go to a state of the art website, and if that state of the art website had a mobile version, it wasn't, like you said, it wasn't the dynamic uh, loading of certain assets specific to a screen size based on the device you're using. It was an entirely different page that detected the browser that you used as you tried to access it. And it was, kind of a throwback to 1994 when the World Wide Web was first made available.
It's very similar to attempting to navigate using curl.
You're gonna have to explain that a little more. I know everything that you said. I know what curl. Curl was a language.
No,
wasn't it?
curl would be the
No.
command line browser for Linux, or curl or wget. You could use either one. Wget's more for fetching, but curl. If you attempt to browse with curl, you're getting basically text links that you attempt to follow, and that's kind of what you had with the quote unquote mobile web of the day, was you had text links that you could at least highlight with whatever navigation system was available to the phone, but you did not across most devices have an ability to render images. It was all text. So if you think about a text-based browser, that's a good way to think about what the mobile web was prior to the iPhone.
Yeah. I think when the web looks like that, I think you actually have to call them hyperlinks. You can't just call them links.
Fair enough.
Oh, man. Yeah, so anyway, I don't know how I wanted to segue into this, and I wasn't sure if we would talk about this at some point in time, but now I feel like where this conversation is go, we should talk about this new iPad that Apple released. Not that this is an Apple specific show, but I have some thoughts, and I wanted to talk to you about them.
Well, let's hear them, because I have no thoughts.
Okay.
Let me clarify. It's not that I have no thoughts. It's that I just haven't looked at the new iPad. I haven't looked at the announcement or any of the details. I just know that a new one was released, and I haven't had a desire to go look at what that entails.
Well, you're not missing anything, in the sense that the iPad is no more capable than it ever was, or at least people force it to be capable, and I'm kind of amazed what they do, but it's a lot of jumping through hoops, and it's like for the original iPad Pro came out in 2018, so 6 years ago, 5 to 6 years ago, and it was an exciting device. It was really cool, especially since they attacked. Well, in Apple parlance, pro doesn't necessarily mean for professionals doing professional work. Whereas, even though that the iPad Pro could do all of that, doesn't necessarily mean it. And a lot of times in Apple's parlance, it's deluxe. I stole that from
Gruber.
I stole that from John Gruber. Yeah, pro means deluxe, and he's not wrong, but people have been, so for the past 5 years, 5+ years that the iPad Pro was released, iPad enthusiast, iPad what's the order of words? iPad users that have attempt to be power users on the iPad. I don't know how to say that more succinctly.
Well, I think you can legitimately carve out a subset of the community that are power users that default to iPad or the iPad as their primary compute device.
Yeah, but okay, I'll be okay with that. They've been clamoring for more capabilities in the iPad, and Apple has, they split it off so that it's no longer running something that they call iOS, which I think, which is just a way to manage the feature set of the devices, because the iPhone is always going to get everything first. iPhone is number one. That's where Apple makes it the most money. It's where its largest user base is. So every new feature that they come up with, it's got to be on the iPhone first, and then they have to bring it to the other devices. And I mean, I will say, I think that Apple has really gotten into a good stride doing that. And I think, there was a time where it was like, I feel like, they were focusing on releasing software every year, and a new major release every year. And in more recent years, they've like, here's their new major release, and they'll list all of the big features, and not all of them come on day one. Some of them come with a point release, sometimes months later. And I really appreciate that, I really appreciate that they're taking their time to do things right. It is better than the, 2.5 years that we waited between Tiger and Leopard, but and then Leopard finally came out, and we're like, oh, and then everybody praised Snow Leopard because it fixed it refined Leopard. Anyway, I think they've really gotten to a much better cadence with their software releases, and they're being. It's been a few years since we had a stinker. It wasn't that long ago, maybe 2017. I can't remember. It was in the late teens, but the iPad is still not capable enough. I want to say Marco Arment made this comment about people are asking, make it more capable, and Apple looks and says, "Here's a new iPad. We made it thinner and faster." And it's like they didn't even hear the user base, or at least a specific set of the apologists, And so, seeing this new iPad, they made it thinner, which is cool. I felt one today. I was in Costco, and I was like, it's really damn thin. It's one of the thinnest device. No, it's probably the thinnest device Apple has made. It's surprisingly thin. It's more like it's closer to the thinness of the display of a MacBook Pro than anything else, than maybe any previous iPad. It's a pretty thin device, and it has the best display Apple's ever released, and it's got the M4 in it, and it's their for single core or single threaded would you say it's threaded, single thread, or single core processes?
I mean, both are options. Typically, single core would be measured as opposed to single thread. Well, actually, I say that, but I think nowadays they run all of them anyway, like a single core and single thread and multi-thread and multi-core.
They're different things. They mean different things, but I don't know how to cut the. I don't know how to slice these.
What I would get to is single core and single threaded performance really don't mean shit. I know people want them to mean something substantial. They just don't. Like, no application is designed around single core, single thread compute. I don't believe anymore.
Then why are they? Why is it a talking point?
Because you get fun numbers that you can compare. Like that's the whole thing. It's no different than the megapixel debate.
So basically, this is just a thing that you benchmark.
Right.
But no actual software actually does this.
I mean, maybe legacy software.
All right. But well, that's not. Anyway, that's not what we're talking about, because. Anyway, so it is. I can't remember if it's single threaded or single core, but whatever. In the benchmark, it is the fastest device that Apple has ever made, and it's still limited by the software. And
the iPad is such a funny thing to me. I understand some of the arguments around trying to make it a more capable device, and I understand the desire to see it be more capable when you think about the computing power it has available to it. But to me, and part of this is just my age and the generations that I've grown up in and what I prefer, but I am so much more efficient with a non-touch interface at everything that I do for the most part, except for media consumption, that I really don't get the make the iPad more capable argument from a non-consumption perspective. Like I do to an extent, like logically I can understand it, and there's a whole generation that's growing up on touch-sensitive devices that probably are drastically faster at that type of interface than I ever will be. So I understand there's a disparity there. But if you take a step back from that, not even taking into account that disparity on interface methodologies, but just take a step back to what is available and what it can do and what it can't do, you can do pretty much any professional workflow you want on an iPad. So the question that I have becomes more, why are you clamoring for it to do more or to be capable of more? What is it not capable of that you're wanting? Like that's where I would like to see the discussion go, because I'm not seeing a lot of examples of this is what I can do currently as opposed to what I would like to be able to do. What I just see are people looking at the compute resources available and wanting more because it's a truly capable product. But that's missing the mark. That's a whole different view on the conversation that is completely just unproductive, for lack of a better way to categorize it, because that's no different than me looking at a top of the line Mac Pro and saying, well, I want it to be more capable. What do you mean? What is it not capable of, or what is your pain point with the experience that you're wanting some change to? You know what I mean?
I do.
And the whole reason that
I can very easily follow that.
And the
logic.
whole reason that has become kind of my view on it is because I can run DaVinci Resolve on an iPad Pro. I have it. It doesn't run everything that I can run on the Mac, but I don't expect it to, because the Mac has just far more available to it. But I can run Final Cut Pro on the iPad if I wanted to, and I can run Logic on the iPad if I wanted to. I have no desire to run those things, and that's part of the disparity between what my preferred tool of choice is as opposed to what the device is capable of. But I think that recognition is what drives me to want more specifics on, well, what do you want out of the device? Like, what truly is the pain point? And that's where I think, as a whole, users are not able to express the desires to Apple either in a cohesive fashion or in a unanimous enough fashion. Maybe like I'm sure there are one or two people out there who have submitted hundreds of feature requests that would make their workflows better, but one voice out of a few thousand isn't going to drive product design decisions. That's where I think the iPad fails, because I don't think a lot of people have a good, clear picture of what they want it to do that isn't just go to a Mac instead, or use the keyboard with the iPad Pro instead,
Yeah, you said two things that I had been thinking of, and one of them was about I would venture to guess the vast majority of the iPad user base are completely and totally happy with their iPad and its capabilities. And that being said, those that aren't, they're looking. I don't know if this is exactly how you'd want to implement it, but basically, you're looking to run Mac OS on the iPad.
Yeah,
you want all, you want all of the, and the display is. I mean, at this point, you can get an iPad with a display the same size as a MacBook Air. You can get a keyboard and trackpad like a like a MacBook Air. So I wouldn't foresee if you could run Mac OS on the iPad, because that's what I was thinking. I was like, I would be really interested in it if you could run Mac OS on it. I don't know why I would be interested in it, but I would. And I can think of quite a few reasons why they aren't doing that. It's they probably the Venn diagram of why they don't run they don't release a version of Mac OS that runs on the iPad probably lines up quite well with the reasons why the Mac doesn't have a touchscreen. Is it going to stay that way forever? I don't think so. I think at some point there's going to be a convergence, and maybe there, there's a device that sits in the middle, but that is it's a touchscreen Mac that you can take the display. I don't know. Anyway,
yeah, I can certainly see a future where the iPad is the form factor of choice, and then you dock it to a keyboard and touchpad, and it transforms into what we know today as a Mac. I don't think that will be the actual implementation, but I can see that, and that would not surprise me.
So I don't know. See, what I can't figure out right now is are the reasons this hasn't happened? Are these reasons that were are we being held back by the MBAs, or are we being held back by the engineers and the designers? I could actually see the arguments going either way. Or maybe it's both of them. I don't know.
I think most of it right now is based more on what you're willing to put in a package. And what I mean by that is if you were to take the absolute maxed out MacBook Pro that you could buy today, could you see somebody justifying that cost plus a keyboard and trackpad and all for an iPad Pro similarly spec'd? Like I don't think the viewing of the form factor as capable at that level is there. And I don't think you could create the same form factor. I think it would have to be thicker and more unwieldy and therefore less pleasing to use. Like right now, I could say that I legitimately see it as an engineering hurdle between what you can comfortably package in that small, thin form factor for an iPad as opposed to what you can actually fit into a fully maxed out, MacBook Pro or Mac Mini, and the capabilities you get between the two being pretty drastically different. Now, is that the full reason? Probably not, because I'm sure there's a whole spreadsheet or set of spreadsheets somewhere tracking why this form factor appeals to this user group and demographic and everything else that's not willing to spend more than X amount and isn't looking to do this type of work. And, there's so many other things you could look at, but just from a pure engineering standpoint, I would be hard pressed to think you could fit a whatever the M4 Ultra version of a chip would be into an iPad form factor that would be comfortable to use.
Yeah, but they are also not putting the M4 Ultra in a MacBook Pro.
I mean, let's drop it to the M4 Max so that similar argument, but it's the same thing. I don't think you could package an M4 Max into an iPad form factor at this point in time. Not one that would be comfortable to use as an iPad.
Right, and I'm not looking for I don't think anybody's looking for that. So, well, probably somebody is, but I think there's just something missing, and I don't think I would agree with the idea that nobody really knows what it is that's missing. It just feels like it's missing, and there are various reasons, and maybe it's one of those things where it's like, Apple is daddy, and daddy knows best for us. It's like, you think you want this thing, but you don't actually. And that's not a difficult position to accept. So, but it doesn't make anybody who feels like something is missing feel better. It doesn't fill that hole, that
well,
emptiness.
I'm willing to bet I can tell you exactly what's missing. This will be where I stake my claim. So what is it that makes a power user on a Mac? and if and I don't mean specific examples, but just kind of yeah. But just kind of think about the things that you can do on a Mac that open it up to what a power user would do. On the iPad, you are limited to things that are able to be distributed via the App Store or within Apple's app guidelines as a developer. And I think that's the missing piece, because there are things that people want to be able to do on the device that's capable of a lot of these things, but the OS has very specific limitations on what it can do because of how it was sourced and derived from iOS in general, because it's not a derivative of macOS. It's a derivative of what was running on the iPhone.
iPhone OS.
And I think it legitimately needs to be. I'm not arguing against those protections, but I think those protections are what makes it feel less capable. Because instead of being able to just say, oh yeah, you can do this thing or that thing, every time Apple wants to open up that capability, they have to rethink an implementation within the constraints of iOS from the ground up. And so those changes take longer and are not necessarily implemented in a way that feels natural every time, and maybe take some further improvement or iteration. And that's where the frustration lies. I believe that's just what I would point to as being that's the missing link. It's that people can't just take this random application that you pull from a third-party developer, even if they're great, comply with everything with regard to the Mac, but they're not distributing via the App Store because of some permission or something else. That immediately renders it impossible to even attempt on the iPad. And that feels like it is more the cause for concern and the missing link when you look at the iPad is basically the same as this MacBook over here. It's just a different form factor.
Yeah, I think I was gonna say something to that. If something related in that, it feels like it's a mistake that. So in macOS, if I am rendering video in Final Cut Pro, and I use Command Tab to bring another application to focus, let's say mail, so that I can delete all the junk mail that I'm getting, Final Cut continues to render where it is. There's if you do that on an iPad, you open up Final Cut and then you switch over to mail, you killed your Final Cut session. There's not rendering anymore, and there's. The only reason that is the case is because the software paradigm that the iPad exists in dictates that. So I'm not,
I kind of want to explore that example a little bit further.
And I'm not going to say that's bad. It's just not a good experience.
So do we know that as of today, that's the behavior as well? Like it does not send it into a background process like audio units would?
That is what I'm picking up from people that use iPads.
Because I can see both sides of it. Is the whole reason I was questioning it. Because one, when you're talking about a general editing workflow, you're kind of expecting to stay with your editing workflow. Like I can understand from Apple's perspective that why would you Command Tab out of it if you're working on it on this device? But I also understand that rendering takes time. Like you want to do other things. There's no reason to be limited to it. So I would say in that case, I would picture it more as a miss from a development perspective, that it's not capable of sending render tasks to a background task like audio units are capable of doing with any of the audio applications available on the iPad. Because you can do something where you're recording to GarageBand or any other audio unit capable application, and you can have it in the background and it continue with the little red banner that you could click on to bring it back to the forefront. So why isn't something similar available for rendering in Final Cut Pro? Would be my question.
Yeah, I don't know. And it feels, I think all said and done, feels like there's something missing or something, but people say that they know what they, I know plenty of people that will say that they know what they want. You've made some good arguments about, well, do you know what you want? You think you know what you want. And it's not that hard to argue either way. But
yeah, and I mean, for complete transparency,
it's currently an unsolvable issue.
I was just going to say, for complete transparency, like I really do feel like the iPad is lacking as well. Personally, I have one. I love it. I use it for all sorts of different things. It is not by any means a part of my workflow for professional life. But at the same time, everything that I would want it to do is what I want the Mac to do. And I would rather use the Mac than the iPad because it's a form factor that I prefer. So part of that feels like a just age and generational bias because of what I've come from. But part of it also is that you can't escape the improvements and efficiencies in workflow that you get from understanding keyboard shortcuts and being able to do things while looking at a screen instead of having to use a more of a point and click style of interface. And so part of where I think the iPad feels like a failure is that a lot of those efficiencies you get from a keyboard-based workflow don't translate to a touch workflow yet. And I do think it's a yet. I think eventually we'll get to a point where somebody has kind of a aha moment and really changes touch workflows to be efficient and even better. And we're just not there.
I think you're right. I do. I can articulate what it is that I would want out of. I haven't bought an iPad since 2012. These iPads, I mean, the ones that have just come out, I'd be like, ooh, I'd like to maybe buy maybe a one generation old iPad, because I don't want to spend the money on a new iPad here. They're even though that screen is gorgeous, they're still pretty expensive. But for me, the thoughts that I've had surrounding it is that I just want to be able to run the software that I want to run on the form factor that I want to run it on. Like you, the Mac is my preferred platform for most things, or my preferred device for most things, the MacBook Pro. And there are certain things that I like to use my iPhone for. But they seem very separate. Like my iPhone doesn't seem like it needs to be more capable, and my Mac doesn't seem to like it needs to be more capable. But there's this idea, I was like, ooh, it would be nice if I could do certain Mac things on an iPad that I can't, that I solely do for my Mac, or solely do on my Mac, because it would be convenient to travel with an iPad as opposed to a Mac sometimes. Not always, but there's certain use cases where it's like, ooh, it'd be great to take an iPad to do iPad things on it. But also it was like, oh, I really need to do a Mac thing and then be able to do something on an iPad in Mac OS. That's what I can understand why I can certainly understand marketing reasons, planning reasons why we can't do that, but that's where I've landed. We have a number of different ways set up for you to get in touch with us to provide feedback, ask questions, or just comment in about something we've discussed.
You can hit us up on Twitter or Instagram at untitled_hosts, or shoot an email over to untitled.hosts@gmail.com.
Or get in touch directly with Jesse at jthart.com, or get in touch with me, John, via telepathy.
If you would like to support our work or are interested in listening to our new after show feed, head over to patreon.com/theUntitledPodcast and take a look at the options we have set up.
Thank you for listening.
We hope you've enjoyed the show.
And we hope to connect with more of you as we continue this journey.
That's a wrap.